Hello all, and thank you very much for this opportunity to be here. I'd like to just start by focusing on the word vision. Heard it many times today in many different shapes and forms. Also heard the word mission. Didn't hear the word values, but you can see where I'm going. Do you know those words in combination usually make up something? What? Yes, strategy, business plans, strategic plans. But what I want to point you to is that those words, they are not scientific words. They are not even economic words. They are dynamic words. They are words of spirit, of energy. And how do we keep that moving in our work? Saving burnout? All those sorts of things. I'll come back to that. But what this is about, this Trillion Trees vision, is about getting that collective energy or a spirit again from wider sectors, an awareness of trees in the wider sectors. So, how many of you here would have known Men of the Trees? Oh, good, thank you. I'm in the right audience, obviously, for now. But how many of you knew when Men of the Trees started? Yes, in Kenya, 1922. Heard it, somebody was saying that. So somebody there had a huge vision. But it was a very simple vision. Richard St. Barbe Baker. Have you heard of him? Now, he said, how hard is it to plant a tree? Everybody around the world can plant trees. And Richard St. Barbe Baker, with that simple vision, we've just got to get people to plant trees. He inspired more than 100 Men of the Trees organizations around the world. So we have good DNA backing us, if you like. And you know, when Richard St. Barbe Baker came here, anybody was aware of that? No, it was a bit after. But E.F. Schumacher, does anybody know of that name? Small is beautiful. Well, Barry Oldfield, the founder, the West Australian founder of Men of the Trees, and Christine Sharp, right? Yes? So they said, we've got to get this whole plight of Western Australian devastation of the land known to the world. What better way to get it out there than to get a world-renowned economist? And he was. E.F. Schumacher was the person largely behind the founding of the World Bank and the International Monetary Funds and institutions like that. He was also the chair of the UK Soil Conservation Council. Did you know that? Well, his film, made by Barry Oldfield, was called On the Edge of the Forest. It's still available, we've still got copies of it there, and it was on the back of that film that Richard St. Barbe Baker said he's got to come out to Western Australia. Following on from that, we had people like David Bellamy coming out, and David Bellamy, in fact, was the one who opened the site where we are based now at St. Barbe Grove in Hazelmere. You know David Bellamy? Of course. All right. So why did we change the name? I'm not going to go there. It's been a war every time you mention name change. In this whole organization, just about every AGM since time began, as I understand, it was about the difficulty of this. Trillion Trees, our current president, said, you know, okay, we've got Million Trees programs. We've had that running for decades now. our program with schools. Billion trees didn't sound quite so rolling off the tongue. As simple as that. That's all it was. Trillion trees. Great. Got on the computer straight away before somebody else stole it, right? Registered it, and just packed it away until we started to test it. So that's how that, actually, the name started. But we soon found out that there were things happening in the world regarding trillions of trees. How many of you have heard the work of Crowther? Well, he was the one in this particular, he's led the research, Yale University, in collaboration with universities around the world. And it was that research, and I'm sorry, this next slide is going to be quite dense. This is the abstract, but the key things there, they found 3.4 trillion trees on the planet, which was in fact good news, because prior to that, do you know what the figure was? The figure was 400 billion. So this was good news. This was really good news that there were 3 trillion trees. But, as you all know, we've got 15 billion cut down. This was part of that research too, with all the evidence. And we have lost 46% since the start of human civilization, which is not that long ago. 7,000 years, around there, depending on which civilization you're talking about. This is an interesting diagram. So again, through the Nature Journal, you'll find Crowther's work also in the Nature Journal. 15 billion trees cut down, 46% since the advent of human civilization. 3.4 trillion trees remain, but look where they are. But this is quite, so you've got your tropical and subtropical, 1.39 trillion, temperate, 0.61 trillion, and boreal, 0.74 trillion. But look at that devastation on the left. Now, we are losing more than 2 trees per person. And per person, what we have left at the moment is a touch over 400 trees per person on the planet. We're losing it by 2 trees. That is interesting. So anyway, moving along, we didn't know that when we came up with this trillion trees, but suddenly there was all this out there. And Crowther has actually gone on to do more research. His 2017 is the link with carbon, actually, and the impact of, there's all sorts of different things like predicting global forest restoration potential, and he's also he's got articles out on quantifying the losses of soil carbon response to warming at global scale. And there's a lot of research that this team has done. Coming from that, that's really sort of inspired us. Just generally trying to get the word out to people. Trillion trees, so yeah, what's it all about? Nobody cares. So then I began to ask the question, imagine what trillion trees looks like in the world, trillion trees more, what that would look like. And what can you imagine would be the impact on our world with a trillion more trees? And this is what sort of came up with it. It symbolizes a healthy planet, and I'm sure you'll come up with different things as well in your own thoughts. Better future, environment is regenerating, deserts, marginal lands are once again home, and so on. People are connected to trees. Now, still, that was, how do we get a Guernsey with this? How do we move with this? So this is, in fact, how trillion trees, our one single goal is to get people inspired to plant 1 trillion trees. But we can't do it here. We can't even do it in Western Australia. So, a world audit of trees tells us there's only 3 trillion trees left, where there were 6 trillion before. We as a global community need to plant 1 trillion trees. Now, do your divisions. The population of the world, by 1 trillion, you get that per capita type figure of 140. Now, that is doable, isn't it? 140 trees per person. But if you expand that, population of Western Australia, how many trees do we need to plant in Western Australia? And we are not talking what we planted before. 1 trillion trees in the name of Men of the Trees had planted close to 15 million. In the next year will be our 40th year. So 15 million trees that we've planted in that time, that's all part of the 3 trillion that's counted on the planet. We've got to start now, line in the sand, go forward. And that is the task. But this has, in fact, inspired people. With the rebranding and with our letting go of a lot of our branches, Perth City Farm, Rockingham Nursery, which is now Native Plants, WA, our Peel branch, which are our backyard growers, they still do voluntary work all over the place. They are all independent now, so that our headquarters can start to actually advocate and do that big work. And I tell you, this name has had traction. This name has had traction because we started to raise funds for our project just past last week. I'm looking at Brian there, our ecological restoration and land care person. Last week we planted at Whiteman Park. We had to raise a total of $30,000. In 2 months, we raised it. Donations were coming in on Give Now for 1 trillion trees in sums we had not seen before. So the name captivates people's imagination. Now, I'm just going to do one thing before ending. This is one way that we are going to activate our vision. And this is part to do with community engagement. I'm just going to ask you quickly here, how many of you, if you were only to choose one of these that represents your key interest in life, how many of you would say health? Put up your hands. We've got one. How many would be commercial? Nobody. Spiritual. We've got few hands go up. Really great. Historical. Some people scratching. I thought their hands were going to go up. Political. One. Educational. Few. Environmental. Now watch it go up. Great. Social. Great. And that's now with this, essentially, this is really great for the purpose of this forum. But if we are to go and convince people to do tree planting, to actually look after land care, we need to convince these people out there. We need to build bridges. We need to speak their language. It's not them coming to us all the time. We must go out and we must participate in other things. And I'll just close by saying that when I was a cultural planner, community engagement person, and I used to run cultural planning workshops around WA, around Australia, etc., the only sector that was, most of the time, you were there in one of my workshops, but most of the time, the sector that was present with its absence was the environmental sector. And I think that needs to change because people want guidance. They want all of that. So anyway, let's go. 1 trillion trees, vision embraces all those sorts of things. And there's another topic for another day, which is about how multidimensional all of this is. And thank you.